A millionaire loses everything after a financial scandal. A lost lottery ticket becomes his only hope. A girl finds a talisman that could change her life. Their fates intertwine in a quest full of secrets and dangers. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know which city you're watching from. The rising sun bathed the skyscrapers of New York City in a golden light as Richard Adams awoke in his luxurious penthouse in the heart of Manhattan. At 45 years old, the real estate mogul was accustomed to waking up with the feeling that the world was his. On this morning, however, an unusual uneasiness disturbed him. Richard got up and walked to the balcony, observing the city that seemed small beneath his feet. He put on his silk robe and headed to the kitchen, where his housekeeper, Mrs. Thompson, was already preparing his elaborate breakfast. "Good morning, Mr. Adams," Mrs. Thompson greeted him with a warm smile. "Did you not sleep well last night?" Richard frowned, picking up a cup of espresso. "How do you know, Mrs. Thompson?" "You have dark circles under your eyes, and I heard footsteps during the night," she replied, placing a tray of fresh fruit on the table. He sighed, sitting down at the table. "You know me too well, Mrs. Thompson. I had a strange dream, or rather, a nightmare. I dreamed I lost everything, that I was on the streets." Mrs. Thompson paused for a moment, looking at him with concern. "Oh, Mr. Adams, that's just a dream. You're the most successful man I know." Richard forced a smile, but the uneasiness persisted. He picked up his tablet and began to read the day's news, a routine that always helped him center himself. However, a headline caught his attention. "Investigations point to possible irregularities in major construction companies." His heart raced. Richard knew his companies weren't entirely up to date with regulations, but he always believed his power and influence would protect him. Now, for the first time, he felt vulnerable. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in the humble neighborhood of Queens, 12-year-old Lucy woke up in a small room she shared with her mother, Martha. The sound of Martha's persistent cough echoed through the cramped room. "Mum, are you okay?" Lucy asked, quickly getting up to help. Martha, a 35-year-old woman, thin and with deep circles under her eyes, tried to smile to reassure her daughter. "I'm fine, my love. I just need to rest a bit more." Lucy knew it wasn't true. Her mother had been sick for months, and the expensive medicine she needed was becoming increasingly difficult to obtain. The girl looked at the old clock on the wall and realized she was late for school. "Mum, I'll make you some tea and then I'll go to school, okay?" Lucy said, running to the small kitchen. While preparing the tea, Lucy thought about how she could help her mother. She was an intelligent and observant child, always looking for ways to improve their situation. After leaving the tea by Martha's bed, Lucy picked up her worn backpack and left for school. On the way, she passed a park where rich people usually took their morning walks. Lucy always observed this world so different from hers, with a mixture of curiosity and sadness. It was then that something caught her attention. A colorful piece of paper stuck in a bush. Intrigued, Lucy approached and picked up the paper. It was a lottery ticket. Her eyes lit up with the possibility that this small piece of paper represented. Without thinking twice, she tucked it into the pocket of her backpack, as if it were a precious treasure. Back at Richard's penthouse, the mogul was preparing for an important business meeting. He put on his custom-made Italian suit, adjusted his silk tie, and picked up his leather briefcase. "Mrs. Thompson, don't expect me for lunch. I have an important meeting with investors," he said, heading to the private elevator. "Good luck, Mr. Adams," replied Mrs. Thompson with an encouraging smile. On the way to the office, Richard couldn't stop thinking about the headline he had read. His driver, noticing the boss's tension, asked if everything was all right. "Everything's great, John," Richard replied, trying to sound confident. "Just another day of hard work." Upon arriving at the imposing building that housed the headquarters of his companies, Richard was greeted with the usual reverence. Secretaries, executives, and employees greeted him with smiles and respectful nods. He entered his office on the top floor, a huge room with a panoramic view of the city. He had barely sat down when his secretary, Patricia, rushed in. "Mr. Adams, there are federal agents in the reception. They have a search and seizure warrant." Richard's face turned pale. His nightmare was becoming reality. "What do you mean, Patricia? That's impossible." "They're coming up, sir." "What should I do?" asked Patricia, visibly nervous. Richard felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. In a few seconds, his mind went through all the questionable decisions he had made over the years, all the shortcuts he had used to build his empire. "Don't do anything, Patricia. Let them in," he said, trying to maintain his composure. As the police invaded his office, Richard looked out the window, observing the city he believed he had conquered. At that moment, he realized that his life was about to change drastically. On the other side of the city, Lucy arrived at school, the lottery ticket safe in her backpack. For her, that piece of paper represented hope, a chance to change her family's fate. Little did she know that her life and Richard's were about to intertwine in ways neither of them could imagine. The day that had begun like any other was about to turn into the turning point in both their lives, marking the beginning of a journey that would test their values, their resilience, and their ability to start over. The hours that followed the arrival of the federal agents at Richard Adams' office were a whirlwind of emotions and events. The once untouchable mogul now found himself cornered in his own boardroom, helplessly watching as agents rummaged through every drawer, every file, every computer. "Mr. Adams, we need you to come with us to answer some questions," said the agent in charge of the operation, a middle-aged man with penetrating eyes and a firm voice. Richard, still stunned, tried to maintain his composure. "Certainly, but I'd like to understand exactly what I'm being accused of." The agent stared at him with a look that mixed contempt and determination. "Tax fraud, money laundering, active corruption. The list is long, Mr. Adams. I suggest you contact your lawyer immediately." As he was escorted out of the building, Richard felt the gazes of his employees. Some showed shock, others disappointment, and some even a certain pleasure in seeing the powerful boss in that situation. The news spread quickly, and by the time he arrived at the police station, there were already reporters waiting for his arrival. Far away, in the public school where Lucy studied, the girl could barely concentrate on her classes. Her thoughts were fixed on the lottery tickets stored in her backpack. During the break, she hid in a corner of the schoolyard to examine the paper more closely. "What do you have there, Lucy?" asked Tyler, her best friend, approaching stealthily. Lucy, startled, tried to hide the ticket. "Nothing, Tyler, just an old paper." Tyler, however, was too smart to be fooled. "Let me see, it looks like a lottery ticket." Reluctantly, Lucy showed the ticket to her friend. "I found it in the park this morning. Do you think it could be worth something?" Tyler's eyes sparkled. "Wow, Lucy, what if it's the winning ticket? You could be rich." The idea made Lucy's heart race. Rich. She could buy the medicine her mother so desperately needed. They could move to a better house, have food on the table every day. "I don't know, Tyler. What if someone is looking for it? What if it's stealing to keep it?" Lucy questioned, her conscience weighing heavily. Tyler shook his head impatiently. "No way. Anyone who loses a ticket like that doesn't deserve the prize. You found it. It's yours." The bell rang, interrupting the conversation. Lucy put the ticket back in her backpack, her mind a whirlwind of possibilities and doubts. Meanwhile, at the police station, Richard was facing hours of interrogation. His lawyer, Mr. Davis, a man with an austere appearance and calm voice, tried to guide him. "Mr. Adams, I recommend that you remain silent. Don't say anything without my guidance," the lawyer whispered. Richard, however, felt compelled to defend himself. "This is absurd. I built an empire from scratch. Everything I have was achieved through hard work." The detective in charge of the case, a middle-aged man named Detective Johnson, looked at Richard with skepticism. "Mr. Adams, we have solid evidence of various irregularities in your companies. Your cooperation can help clarify the situation." The hours dragged on and Richard felt his world crumbling. Outside, the news of his arrest already dominated the newscasts. His photo, once featured in business magazines as a symbol of success, now illustrated sensationalist headlines. Late in the afternoon, Lucy was returning home, still absorbed in thoughts about the ticket. When she arrived, she found her mother, Martha, sitting in the small living room with a worried expression. "Mom, what's wrong?" Lucy asked, putting her backpack aside. Martha sighed deeply. "Oh, honey, Mrs. Rodriguez came to tell me that the building owner wants to raise the rent again. I don't know how we're going to manage to pay." Lucy felt a tightness in her chest. Instinctively, her hand went to her backpack where the lottery ticket was stored. Could this be the miracle they so desperately needed? "Mom, don't worry, everything will be all right," Lucy said, hugging Martha tightly. That night, while Lucy and Martha shared a simple meal, Richard faced his first night in a prison cell. The contrast between the two realities could not be greater. Lying on the hard bunk, Richard mentally reviewed the day's events. How could everything have crumbled so quickly? His thoughts were interrupted by a cellmate. "Hey, aren't you that rich guy from TV?" asked the man, an individual of rough appearance. Richard turned to the wall, ignoring the question. For the first time in his life, he wished to be invisible. On the other side of the city, Lucy couldn't sleep. The lottery ticket seemed to burn in her backpack. She got up silently and went to the living room where she turned on the small TV with the volume low. On the screen, a reporter spoke animatedly. "And the accumulated Mega Millions jackpot has reached 150 million. The drawing will take place next week, and lottery fever is sweeping the country." Lucy's eyes widened. $150 million. It was more money than she could imagine. With such an amount, she could not only help her mother but transform the lives of the entire community. Turning off the TV, Lucy went back to bed, her mind buzzing with ideas and dreams. Meanwhile, in his cell, Richard finally fell asleep, exhausted, his sleep populated by nightmares of fall and loss. The night advanced over New York City, covering both the luxurious skyscrapers and the slums with its dark mantle. Two lives, so different and seemingly disconnected, were about to intertwine in unexpected ways, united by the invisible thread of destiny and by a simple lottery ticket. The following day would bring new challenges and revelations for Richard and Lucy, each facing very different but equally crucial battles. The city slept, oblivious to the drama unfolding, preparing for another act in this intricate real-life soap opera. The dawn brought a new reality for Richard Adams. The electronic alarm clock in his luxurious penthouse was replaced by the metallic sound of bars being opened. Sitting on the edge of the hard bunk, he rubbed his eyes, still not fully believing the situation he found himself in. "Breakfast, Adams," announced a guard, pushing a tray through a small opening in the cell door. Richard looked at the plate of simple, unappetizing food, so different from the elaborate breakfasts that Mrs. Thompson used to prepare. His stomach turned, not from hunger, but from disgust and anxiety. Meanwhile, in the small house in Queens, Lucy woke up early as usual. She found her mother, Martha, already up in the kitchen preparing weak coffee. "Good morning, Mom," Lucy said, giving Martha an affectionate kiss on the cheek. "How are you feeling today?" Martha forced a smile, but couldn't hide the paleness in her face. "I'm fine, dear. Just a little tired." Lucy knew her mother was lying to not worry her. The persistent cough and deep dark circles told a different story. The girl felt the weight of the lottery ticket in her backpack, as if it could somehow solve all their problems. "Mom, what if we won the lottery?" Lucy asked, trying to sound casual. Martha laughed softly. "Oh, honey, that would be a dream, wouldn't it? But we don't even have money to buy a ticket, let alone win." Lucy bit her lip, containing the urge to tell about the ticket she had found. Something inside her said to wait, to be sure before creating hope. At the police station, Richard was taken for another interrogation session. His lawyer, Mr. Davis, was already waiting for him in the room, with a grave expression on his face. "Mr. Adams, the situation is more serious than we thought," the lawyer said in a low voice. "The investigations have revealed a much larger corruption scheme. Several of your associates are already cooperating with the authorities." Richard felt the blood freeze in his veins. "Cooperating? You mean they're turning me in?" Mr. Davis nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so. And there's more. Your accounts have been frozen and your assets are being confiscated for investigation." The news hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. In a matter of hours, he had gone from one of the richest and most powerful men in the country to a prisoner without a penny to his name. Meanwhile, at school, Lucy could barely concentrate on her classes. Her thoughts were fixed on the lottery ticket and the possibilities it represented. During the break, she hid again in the corner of the schoolyard to examine the ticket more closely. "Still with that paper, Lucy?" Tyler asked, approaching stealthily. Lucy startled, quickly hiding the ticket. "Shh, Tyler, I don't want anyone to know." Tyler sat down next to his friend, lowering his voice. "Have you checked if it's a winner yet?" Lucy shook her head. "I don't know how to do that, and if it is, Tyler, how am I going to claim the prize being underage?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications that Lucy's young mind was only beginning to comprehend. Back at the police station, Richard faced an endless parade of accusations and evidence. Each new detail revealed made him sink further into his chair, the reality of his actions finally catching up with him. "Mr. Adams," said Detective Johnson, "we have evidence that you diverted millions of dollars from public funds destined for housing projects. Do you know how many families could have benefited from that money?" The question hit Richard in a way he didn't expect. For the first time, he was forced to consider the real impact of his actions beyond his own enrichment. At the end of the day, exhausted and defeated, Richard was taken back to his cell. On the way, he passed a TV turned on in the guard's room. A news item caught his attention. The lottery jackpot had risen to 200 million. For a brief moment, Richard allowed himself to dream. What if he had a winning ticket? It could be his salvation, a way to recover everything he was losing. It was then that he remembered. He had bought a ticket days before his arrest, but he couldn't remember where he had put it. The memory hit him like lightning. The ticket. He had kept it in the pocket of his favorite jacket, the one he had worn on the day of his arrest. But where was the jacket now? Desperate, Richard called the guard. "Please, I need to know where my clothes are, the ones I was wearing when I was arrested." The guard looked at him indifferently. "They were sent to your residence, along with your other personal belongings." Richard's heart raced. His penthouse was probably already being searched by investigators. The ticket could be anywhere, or worse, it could have been lost or discarded. That night, while Richard tossed and turned in his cell, tormented by the possibility of having lost his last chance at redemption, Lucy lay in her humble bed, the lottery ticket safe under her pillow. Two worlds so far apart, united by a small piece of paper that carried the power to change destinies. New York City slept, oblivious to the drama unfolding in its most disparate corners, while fate prepared its next moves on this intricate chessboard of life. The sun had barely risen when Lucy woke up with a start. Her first instinct was to check if the lottery ticket was still under her pillow. Feeling the paper between her fingers, she let out a sigh of relief. The sound of her mother's cough in the next room brought her back to the reality of her responsibilities. Getting up silently, Lucy went to the kitchen to prepare tea for Martha. As the water boiled, she looked out the window, watching the Queens neighborhood wake up. Street vendors began to set up their stalls, and workers rushed out to catch the bus. "Good morning, my love," said Martha, entering the kitchen with slow steps. Lucy turned, forcing a smile. "Good morning, Mum. I made you some tea. How are you feeling?" Martha sat down at the table, sighing. "A little better, but still tired. I'm not sure if I'll be able to go to work today." Lucy's heart tightened. Her mother worked as a housekeeper in family homes, a heavy job that was becoming increasingly difficult due to her deteriorating health. "Mom, why don't you rest today? I can skip school and take care of the house," Lucy suggested. Martha shook her head firmly. "No way. Your education is the most important thing." "I'll be fine, don't worry." Meanwhile, in the prison cell, Rodrigo had spent a sleepless night. The memory of the lottery ticket tormented him. He desperately tried to remember any detail that could help him locate it. When the guard came to bring breakfast, Rodrigo anxiously approached him. "Please, I need to speak with my lawyer. It's urgent." The guard looked at him suspiciously but nodded. "I'll see what I can do." Hours later, Dr. Mendez arrived at the prison, looking tired and worried. "Mr. Alves, what happened? Did they find more evidence?" Rodrigo lowered his voice, moving closer to the bars. "Mendez, I need you to go to my penthouse. There's a lottery ticket in the pocket of my blue suit jacket. It's our chance to solve everything." The lawyer looked at Rodrigo with a mixture of pity and disbelief. "Mr. Alves, I'm sorry, but your penthouse has been sealed by the authorities. No one can enter now." The news fell like a bucket of cold water on Rodrigo. His last hope seemed to be slipping through his fingers. Back in Parisopolis, Lucy was walking to school, her body present but her mind far away. At the school gate, she was approached by Tiago. "Hey, Lucy, have you decided what to do with the ticket yet?" he asked anxiously. Lucy looked around, making sure no one was listening. "I still don't know, Tiago. I'm afraid of getting my hopes up for nothing." Tiago smiled, his eyes shining with excitement. "Hey, I had an idea. My uncle works at a lottery shop. We can ask him to check the ticket for us without telling anyone." Tiago's proposal made Lucy's heart race. It was risky, but the temptation to know the truth was too great. "Okay," she agreed hesitantly. "But it has to be a secret, okay?" While the young friends planned their little adventure on the other side of town, Rodrigo's life continued to crumble. His business empire, built over decades, was being dismantled piece by piece by investigators. In Detective Oliveira's office, a tense meeting was taking place. "People, we have news," he announced, pointing to the evidence board. The analysis of the ticket fragment found in the park confirmed it's part of the same ticket that Lucy found. A murmur of surprise ran through the room. "But there's more," Oliveira continued. "We discovered that Alves made a suspicious transfer to an offshore account the day before buying the tickets. This could indicate he was preparing for an escape." The investigators exchanged significant looks. The case was getting more and more complex. That afternoon, Lucy and Martha were called back to the police station. When they arrived, they were surprised to see a man in a suit waiting with Detective Oliveira. "Lucy, Mrs. Martha, this is Dr. Mendez, Mr. Rodrigo Alves's lawyer," Oliveira introduced. Mendez greeted them politely, but his gaze was calculating. "Ladies, I'm here to discuss the lottery ticket situation." Lucy felt a shiver run down her spine. The lawyer's presence made everything much more real and scary. Oliveira took the floor. "Lucy, we need you to tell us again with all the details how you found the ticket." The girl took a deep breath and began to recount her story, aware of the attentive looks on her. When she finished, Mendez leaned forward. "Miss Lucy, are you absolutely sure you found the ticket exactly where you said? There's no possibility it was planted there?" Martha stood up, indignant. "What are you insinuating? My daughter is not a liar," Oliveira quickly intervened. "Calm down, Mrs. Martha. Dr. Mendez is just doing his job, but I agree the insinuation is unnecessary." The atmosphere in the room became tense. Lucy, feeling the weight of the situation, spoke with a maturity beyond her years. "I told the truth. I found the ticket by chance and did what I thought was right by bringing it here." Mendez nodded, but it was clear he wasn't convinced. "Detective, my client insists he has proof that the ticket is his. We demand a more thorough investigation." Oliveira sighed. "We are investigating all possibilities, Dr. Mendez. But for now, the ticket remains in police custody." While the meeting unfolded at the police station, in Paraisópolis, a mysterious figure was watching Lucy and Martha's house. It was Carlos, an old associate of Rodrigo's, who had been sent to investigate on his own. Carlos took his cell phone out of his pocket and dialed a number. "Boss, I found the girl's house. What do you want me to do?" On the other end of the line, a deep voice answered, "Keep watching. We need to find out if they know more than they're telling." The plot was thickening. What had begun as a simple case of a lost ticket was turning into a complex web of intrigue, suspicion, and secrets. As night fell over São Paulo, each character in this story found themselves facing moral dilemmas and crucial decisions. Lucy, struggling to protect her integrity and her family. Rodrigo, desperate to prove his innocence, even through questionable means. And Detective Oliveira, determined to uncover the truth no matter where it led him. Fate, like a skilled playwright, had intertwined these lives in unexpected ways. And now, with the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together, it remained to be seen who would emerge victorious from this game of cat and mouse. The moon once again rose over the city, a silent witness to the human dramas unfolding under its light. And in the shadows of the night, new secrets were forming, ready to be revealed in the next act of this intricate real-life soap opera. The sun had barely risen when Lucy woke up startled. A nightmare had tormented her during the night. In it, mysterious men invaded her house in search of the ticket. Sitting up in bed, she tried to calm her ragged breathing. In the next room, Martha hadn't slept well either. Worries about her health, bills to pay, and now this whole situation with the ticket weighed heavily on her shoulders. She got up, determined not to let Lucy notice her anguish. Meanwhile, in prison, Rodrigo was receiving an unexpected visit. It wasn't his lawyer, but Elena, his ex-wife, whom he hadn't seen since their tumultuous divorce years ago. "Elena?" Rodrigo couldn't hide his surprise. "What are you doing here?" Elena, an elegant woman in her 40s, sat down in front of him, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. "I came to see with my own eyes, Rodrigo. How could you fall so low?" Elena's words hit Rodrigo like a punch to the stomach. For a moment, he saw his reflection in her eyes, no longer the powerful tycoon, but a defeated and desperate man. I don't know," he admitted, for the first time letting his mask of arrogance fall. Everything crumbled so fast. Elena sighed, a mixture of pity and disappointment in her voice. "Rodrigo, you need to tell the truth about everything." At the police station, Detective Oliveira was facing his own battle. The pressure from his superiors to solve the case quickly was increasing. "Oliveira!" called Captain Santos, entering his office. "What's this story about a lottery ticket complicating our investigation?" Oliveira took a deep breath before answering. "Captain, we believe this ticket may be the key to unraveling a much larger money laundering scheme." Santos frowned. "And where does a girl from Paraisópolis fit into all this?" "That's the most intriguing part, sir," Oliveira replied. "It seems to be an incredible coincidence, but we're investigating all possibilities." Meanwhile, in Paraisópolis, Carlos, Rodrigo's associate, continued his surveillance. He watched Lucy leaving for school, Martha going to work. Something about that everyday scene bothered him. How could such simple people be involved in something so big? His cell phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Speak, boss." The voice on the other end was urgent. "Carlos, we need to act. Find out where they kept the ticket. Use any means necessary, but be discreet." Carlos felt a knot in his stomach. "Any means necessary" was a phrase he knew well, and it usually didn't end well. At school, Lucy tried to concentrate on her classes, but her mind was far away. Tiago, her friend, noticed her distraction. "Hey, Lucy, is everything okay?" he asked during the break. Lucy hesitated. She wanted so badly to share the weight she was carrying, but she knew she couldn't. "Yeah, Tiago. Just worried about my mom." Tiago nodded, understanding, but his eyes showed he knew there was more to this story. Back at the police station, Oliveira was receiving surprising information. One of his investigators hurriedly entered his office. "Boss, we discovered something about Martha's past. Lucy's mother," he said, breathless. Oliveira leaned forward, interested. "What did you find?" "She worked as a housekeeper in Rodrigo Alves' house about 15 years ago," revealed the investigator. The news fell like a bomb. Oliveira stood up, his mind working furiously. "This changes everything. We need to bring Martha in for questioning immediately." Meanwhile, in prison, the conversation between Rodrigo and Elena took an unexpected turn. "Rodrigo," said Elena, her voice trembling slightly, "there's something you need to know. Something I've hidden from you all these years." Rodrigo felt his heart racing. Elena's tone promised a revelation that could change everything. "What are you talking about, Elena?" he asked, fearing the answer. Elena took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Remember that maid, Martha, who worked for us years ago? Well, there's a reason why I insisted so much on you firing her." Elena's words hung in the air, laden with a long-kept secret. Rodrigo felt the world spinning around him, sensing that what he was about to hear would change the course of his life forever. As the afternoon progressed in São Paulo, the fates of Rodrigo, Lucy, Martha, and everyone involved in this complex plot became even more intertwined. Secrets from the past were emerging, threatening to shatter the fragile connections that held their lives together. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the city. In Paraisópolis, Carlos was preparing to break into Lucy and Martha's house. At the police station, Oliveira was organizing a team to bring Martha in for questioning. And in prison, Rodrigo was hearing a truth that threatened to destroy everything he believed he knew about his life. The stage was set for revelations that promised to shake the foundations of this story to its core. And as always, fate watched silently, ready to cast its next move in this intricate game of life's chess. Night was falling over São Paulo, bringing with it an atmosphere charged with tension and expectation. In prison, Rodrigo was still trying to process Elena's bombshell revelation. "What do you mean, Elena?" he asked, his voice trembling. "What secret is this about Martha?" Elena took a deep breath, tears forming in her eyes. "Rodrigo, Martha, she's the mother of your daughter." The words hit Rodrigo like lightning. "My daughter? What are you talking about? Remember that trip you took shortly before our wedding?" Elena continued, her voice low. "Martha was pregnant when she started working for us. I found out the truth and forced her to give the child up for adoption." Rodrigo felt the world spinning around him. A daughter. He had a daughter he never knew. Meanwhile, in Paraisópolis, Carlos was preparing to break into Lucy and Martha's house. Hidden in the shadows, he watched the quiet street, waiting for the right moment. Inside the house, Lucy was helping her mother prepare a simple dinner. The atmosphere between them was tense. both carrying the weight of the secrets and worries of the past few days. "Mom," Lucy began hesitantly, "do you think we did the right thing turning in the ticket?" Martha stopped what she was doing and looked at her daughter tenderly. "Yes, my love. We should always do what's right, even when it's difficult." At that moment, a loud knock on the door startled them. Martha went to answer, cautious. To her surprise, it was Detective Oliveira, accompanied by 2 police officers. "Mrs. Martha," said Oliveira, his tone serious, "we need you to come with us to the station to answer some questions." Lucy ran to her mother's side, frightened. "What's happening?" Oliveira bent down to be at eye level with Lucy. "Don't worry, Lucy, your mother isn't in trouble. We just need to ask her some questions." As Martha was being taken away, Carlos, who was watching everything from his hiding place, quickly grabbed his cell phone. "Boss, the police just took the woman." "What do I do now?" The voice on the other end of the line was cold and calculating. "The girl is alone?" "Excellent. It's our chance to find the ticket." At the police station, Oliveira was leading Martha to an interrogation room. "Mrs. Martha, why didn't you tell us you worked in Rodrigo Alves' house?" Martha turned pale. I didn't think it was important. It was so long ago." "Important," Oliveira pressed. "You find a lottery ticket that might belong to your former employer, now imprisoned, and you didn't think that information was relevant." Meanwhile, in prison, Rodrigo was struggling to comprehend the magnitude of Elena's revelation. "How could you do this, Elena?" he asked, his voice a mixture of anger and pain. "How could you hide my own daughter from me?" Elena was openly sobbing now. "I was afraid of losing you, Rodrigo. Afraid that you would choose her and Martha instead of me. In Paraísopolis, Carlos took advantage of Martha's absence to break into the house." Lucy, frightened by the noise, hid in the bedroom. "I know you're there, girl," Carlos called, his voice echoing through the small house. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk about the ticket." Lucy, trembling, took her cell phone and silently dialed the emergency number that Detective Oliveira had given her. In the interrogation room, Martha finally broke down. "All right, I'll tell you everything," she said through tears, "but it's not what you're thinking. The truth is much more complicated." Oliveira leaned forward, all his senses on alert. "We're listening, Mrs. Martha." Martha took a deep breath, preparing to reveal a secret kept for years. "Lucy, she's Rodrigo Alves's daughter." The revelation fell like a bomb in the room. Oliveira was momentarily speechless. At that instant, his cell phone rang. It was Lucy's emergency number. "My God," he muttered, standing up abruptly. "We need to go to Paraísopolis now." As several police cars raced through the streets of São Paulo towards Lucy's house, the girl found herself face to face with Carlos. "Please," she begged, "don't hurt my mother. I don't know where the ticket is, I swear." Carlos, seeing the fear in the girl's eyes, felt a pang of guilt. "I'm not going to hurt anyone, kid. I just need answers." The sound of sirens in the distance made Carlos panic. He looked at Lucy one last time before running for the exit. Minutes later, Oliveira and his team burst into the house, finding Lucy huddled in the corner, shaking. "Everything's okay now, Lucy." Oliveira comforted her, hugging her. "You're safe." As the night progressed, the fates of everyone involved in this complex plot converged to a crucial point. Long-kept secrets were coming to light, threatening to change the course of their lives forever. In prison, Rodrigo contemplated the possibility of having a daughter he never knew. At the police station, Martha finally revealed the truth about Lucy's past. And in Paraísopolis, a frightened girl began to understand the true value of what she had found. Not just a lottery ticket, but the key to unraveling the mystery of her own origin. Fate, in its endless wisdom, had intertwined these lives in unimaginable ways. And now, with the truth emerging from the shadows, it remained to be seen how each of them would face the consequences of long-buried secrets. Dawn was approaching, promising a new day full of revelations and confrontations. The stage was set for the final act of this intricate real-life drama, where the lines between right and wrong, love and betrayal, were becoming increasingly blurred. The sunrise in São Paulo brought with it an atmosphere of expectation and apprehension. At the central police station, Detective Oliveira had not slept, spending the night organizing the new information and preparing for the confrontations that would surely come. Lucy, who had spent the night under police protection, woke up feeling confused and frightened. The revelations of the night before still echoed in her mind. Was it true? Was Rodrigo Alves, the man whose photo she had seen in the newspapers, her father? In his cell, Rodrigo also hadn't been able to sleep. The idea of having a daughter, one he had never met, consumed him. Memories of his past with Martha, once so insignificant, now took on new meaning. "Guard," he called as soon as he heard movement in the hallway. "I need to speak with Detective Oliveira urgently." Meanwhile, Martha was being brought back to the police station for more questioning. Her face showed the weight of years of secrets about to be revealed. Oliveira received her in his office, his expression serious but not hostile. "Mrs. Martha, we need to clarify everything. From the beginning." Martha nodded, taking a deep breath. 12 years ago, I worked in Rodrigo and Elena Alves's house. Rodrigo and we got involved. It was brief, but intense. When I found out I was pregnant, Elena found out too. Oliveira listened attentively, taking notes. "And what happened then?" "Elena threatened me," Martha continued, tears in her eyes. "She said she would destroy my life if I told Rodrigo. She gave me money to leave, to raise the child away from them. I accepted, thinking it was best for my daughter." On the other side of the city, in a luxurious office, Elena was receiving an alarming phone call. "Mrs. Alves, the police are on their way to interrogate you," her assistant informed her. Elena felt panic growing. Years of lies and manipulations were about to crumble. She quickly began gathering documents, thinking of fleeing. Back at the police station, Oliveira was organizing a crucial meeting. In a conference room, he gathered his team, lawyers, and prepared for the confrontation that would change the course of the investigation. "Bring Rodrigo Alves," he ordered. "It's time to put all the cards on the table." When Rodrigo entered the room, handcuffed and escorted by guards, his eyes immediately met Martha's. For a moment, time seemed to stop. "Martha," he murmured, a mixture of emotions in his voice. Oliveira cleared his throat, calling everyone's attention. "Mr. Alves, Mrs. Martha, we're here to clarify the truth about the lottery ticket and other family matters." At that moment, the door opened, and Lucy entered, accompanied by a social worker. Her wide eyes moved from Martha to Rodrigo, trying to process the situation. "Lucy," Martha began, her voice trembling. Rodrigo looked at the girl, seeing for the first time the traits she had inherited from him. You're my daughter?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The atmosphere in the room was one of palpable tension. Oliveira took the floor, determined to maintain control of the situation. "Let's start from the beginning," he said. "Mr. Alves, do you confirm that you bought several lottery tickets days before your arrest?" Rodrigo nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on Lucy. "Yes, I bought them. I was desperate, thinking I could solve my financial problems." "And what happened to those tickets?" Oliveira pressed. I lost one of them in the park. The others were in my jacket when I was arrested," Rodrigo replied. Lucy, gathering all her courage, spoke for the first time. "I found the ticket in the park. I didn't know whose it was." Oliveira turned to Martha. "And you, Mrs. Martha, when did you discover that the ticket might belong to Mr. Alves?" Martha lowered her eyes. "I suspected when I saw the news about his arrest, but I wasn't sure. I didn't want to get involved." The detective then addressed Lucy. "Lucy, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell us exactly what happened last night, when that man broke into your house." As Lucy recounted the events of the previous night, Rodrigo and Martha exchanged looks laden with emotion and regret. Years of secrets and lies were finally coming to light. Outside the police station, a familiar figure watched the movement. It was Carlos, Rodrigo's associate, now tormented by doubts about his role in this story. As the morning progressed, more pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. The lottery ticket, previously the center of the investigation, now seemed almost secondary in the face of the family revelations. Oliveira, sensing that he was close to unraveling the entire mystery, asked Rodrigo one last question. "Mr. Alves, do you still maintain that you were not involved in money laundering?" Rodrigo, looking at Lucy and Martha, felt the weight of his past actions. It was time for the truth. He began, his voice choked with emotion. At that moment, the door to the room burst open. It was Eleanor, escorted by police officers, her face a mask of panic and resignation. "Stop!" she shouted. "I confess, it was me who orchestrated the entire money laundering scheme. Rodrigo knew nothing about it." The room fell into a stunned silence. Oliveira, quickly recovering from the surprise, ordered Elena to be detained. As Elena was led away, Rodrigo, Martha, and Lucy found themselves at the center of an emotional whirlwind. Years of secrets, lies, and misunderstandings converged on this moment. Oliveira, realizing the delicacy of the situation, softened his tone. "I think you three need a moment alone. Use my office." As the newly discovered family withdrew for a long overdue conversation, Oliveira turned to his team. "The case isn't over, folks. We still have a lot to investigate about this money laundering scheme." The midday sun shone over São Paulo, illuminating a web of events that no one could have predicted. A simple lottery ticket had triggered a series of revelations that would forever change the lives of all involved. In Oliveira's office, Rodrigo, Martha, and Lucy prepared for a conversation that would define their future. Fate, in its infinite wisdom, had brought this unlikely family together, offering them a chance for redemption and a new beginning. The sun was setting over São Paulo, casting a golden glow over the city that had witnessed so many twists and turns in recent days. In Detective Oliveira's office, Rodrigo, Martha, and Lucy sat in a silence charged with emotion. Rodrigo was the first to break the silence. "Lucy," he began, his voice trembling, "I know that nothing I say can make up for the lost years, but I want you to know that if I had known—" Lucy interrupted him, her eyes shining with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Why did you do all those wrong things? Why did you get involved with bad people?" The question, in its childlike simplicity, hit Rodrigo hard. He looked at Martha, seeking strength before answering. I lost my way, Lucy. I became so obsessed with building an empire, with being powerful, that I forgot what really mattered." Martha put her hand on Lucy's shoulder. "Sweetie, sometimes adults make mistakes. Big mistakes. I also made a mistake by not telling you the truth." Lucy absorbed everything, her young mind struggling to process the revelations. "And now, what's going to happen to us?" Before anyone could answer, there was a knock on the door. It was Detective Oliveira. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, entering the room, "but we have important news." Everyone turned to him, anxious. "Elena confessed everything," Oliveira continued. "The money laundering scheme, the threats to Martha, everything. Rodrigo, many of the charges against you have been dropped, but there are still issues to be resolved." Rodrigo nodded, a mixture of relief and apprehension on his face. "I understand, Detective. I'm ready to face the consequences of my actions." Oliveira turned to Lucy and Martha. "As for the lottery ticket, after a thorough investigation, we confirmed that it did indeed belong to Rodrigo. However, due to the extraordinary circumstances and your act of honesty, the court has decided that the prize will be split." The news fell like a bomb in the room. Lucy looked at her mother, her eyes wide with surprise. "Split?" Martha asked, incredulous. Oliveira nodded. "Half for you, half for a compensation fund for the victims of the financial schemes." Rodrigo stood up, a new determination in his eyes. "It's more than fair. In fact, I'd like to donate my entire share to that fund. It's the least I can do to start correcting my mistakes." Lucy looked at Rodrigo in a new light. Perhaps there was hope for her newly discovered father after all. In the weeks that followed, everyone's life underwent major transformations. Rodrigo, although still facing some minor charges, dedicated himself to cooperating with justice and repairing the damage caused by his past actions. Martha and Lucy, with their share of the prize, were finally able to have a more comfortable life. Martha received the medical treatment she so badly needed, and Lucy was able to focus on her studies without the financial worries that had previously tormented her. The relationship between Rodrigo, Martha, and Lucy was delicate, but they slowly began to build bonds. Supervised meetings, honest conversations, and a lot of psychological support helped the family navigate this new emotional territory. Elena, in turn, faced a long judicial process, finally reaping the consequences of years of manipulation and crimes. 6 months after that fateful night when Lucy found the ticket, the family gathered in Ibirapuera Park, the same place where it all began. "You know," Lucy said, looking at the exact spot where she had found the ticket, "sometimes I think it was fate." Rodrigo, sitting next to her on a bench, nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe it was, Lucy. Sometimes life gives us second chances in mysterious ways." Martha, standing behind them, smiled softly. The important thing is what we do with those chances. As the sun set over the park, casting long shadows on the grass, the three contemplated the future. It wouldn't be easy. There was much to be rebuilt and forgiven, but for the first time in a long time, there was hope. Lucy took Rodrigo and Martha's hands, joining them with hers. In that moment, silent and full of promises, a new family was born from the ashes of long-buried secrets. Detective Oliveira, observing the scene from afar, couldn't help but smile. In his years of career, he had rarely seen a case with such an unexpected and, in a way, hopeful outcome. As night fell over São Paulo, the city lights came on one by one, like earthly stars. Life went on, with its joys and challenges, its falls and redemptions. And somewhere in that vast metropolis, a simple lottery ticket, now kept as a memento in a drawer, served as a silent witness to how fate can change lives overnight, intertwining stories in ways that no one could have predicted. "Good morning, my love," said Martha, entering the kitchen with slow steps. Lucy turned, forcing a smile. "Good morning, Mom. I made you some tea." Martha sat down at the small kitchen table, her face showing signs of fatigue. "Thank you, sweetheart. You're always so thoughtful." Lucy placed the steaming cup of tea in front of her mother and sat down across from her. The events of the past months had brought them closer, but there was still an undercurrent of unspoken words between them. "Mom," Lucy began hesitantly, "I was thinking, maybe we could invite Dad over for dinner this weekend." Martha looked up from her tea, surprise evident in her eyes. It was the first time Lucy had referred to Rodrigo as Dad without prompting. "Are you sure you're ready for that, Lucy?" Martha asked gently. Lucy nodded, a determined look on her young face. "I think so. I mean, it's been 6 months and we've been meeting regularly. I want to try having a normal family dinner." Martha reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "If that's what you want, then we'll do it. I'll call Rodrigo later today." As Lucy left for school, Martha found herself lost in thought. The journey they had been on since that fateful night when Lucy found the lottery ticket had been tumultuous, to say the least. From the shocking revelations about Lucy's parentage to the legal battles and emotional upheavals, it had been a whirlwind of change. Rodrigo, true to his word, had been working tirelessly to make amends. He had donated his entire share of the lottery winnings to the Victims' Compensation Fund and had been cooperating fully with the authorities to unravel the complex web of financial misdeeds that Elena had woven. Martha's phone buzzed, pulling her out of her reverie. It was a text from Rodrigo. "Good morning. How are you and Lucy doing today?" These daily check-ins had become a routine, a small but significant gesture that showed Rodrigo's commitment to being part of their lives. Martha smiled as she typed her reply, including Lucy's suggestion for a family dinner. Across town, in a modest apartment that was a far cry from his former luxurious penthouse, Rodrigo read Martha's message with a mixture of joy and trepidation. A family dinner. It was something he had dreamed of but never dared to hope for. As he prepared for another day of meetings with lawyers and investigators, Rodrigo couldn't help but reflect on the incredible turn his life had taken. He had lost his fortune, his status, and very nearly his freedom, but in return, he had gained something far more precious, a chance to know his daughter and to rebuild the family he never knew he had. The day passed in a blur of activity for all of them. Lucy at school found herself distracted, her mind wandering to thoughts of the upcoming dinner. How would it feel to have both her parents at the same table, sharing a meal like a normal family? Martha threw herself into her work at the local community center, a job she had taken up after their lives had stabilized. The center helped families in need, and Martha found a sense of purpose in giving back to the community that had supported her through tough times. Rodrigo spent his day in intense discussions with his legal team. Though many of the charges against him had been dropped, there were still loose ends to tie up. But for once, his mind wasn't solely focused on legal strategies and damage control. He found himself thinking about what dish he should bring to the family dinner, wondering what Lucy's favorite foods might be. As evening fell, Lucy and Martha began preparing dinner. The atmosphere in their small kitchen was charged with nervous energy. "Do you think he'll like the lasagna?" Lucy asked, carefully layering the pasta. Martha smiled, touched by her daughter's concern. "I'm sure he'll love it, sweetheart. It's your specialty after all." Just as they were putting the finishing touches on the meal, There was a knock at the door. Lucy froze, her eyes wide. Martha gave her an encouraging nod before going to answer. Rodrigo stood in the doorway, a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a box of chocolates in the other. He looked as nervous as Lucy felt. "Hello, Martha," he said softly before his eyes moved to Lucy. "Hi, Lucy." "Hi, Dad," Lucy replied, the words still feeling strange on her tongue. As they sat down to dinner, the initial awkwardness slowly began to melt away. They talked about Lucy's school projects, Martha's work at the community center, and Rodrigo's efforts to make amends for his past mistakes. Halfway through the meal, Lucy suddenly burst out laughing. Both Martha and Rodrigo looked at her, puzzled. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. "It's just, a few months ago, I found a lottery ticket in the park, and now look at us. It's like something out of a movie." Her laughter was contagious, and soon all three of them were chuckling. The tension that had been lingering in the air dissipated, replaced by a warmth that felt, well, like family. As the evening drew to a close, Rodrigo helped with the dishes, a task he admitted he had rarely done in his previous life. Lucy watched her parents working side by side in the kitchen, feeling a sense of rightness she couldn't quite explain. Before leaving, Rodrigo turned to Lucy. "Thank you for inviting me tonight," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It means more to me than you can know." Lucy hesitated for a moment before stepping forward and giving him a quick hug. "Thanks for coming, Dad." As the door closed behind Rodrigo, Martha put her arm around Lucy's shoulders. "You okay, sweetie?" Lucy nodded, a mix of emotions swirling in her eyes. "I think so. It's just a lot to take in." Martha kissed the top of her daughter's head. "I know, my love. We'll figure this out together, okay?" Meanwhile, Detective Oliveira was busy coordinating the next steps of the investigation. He turned to his team, determination etched on his face. "All right, people. We've made significant progress, but there's still work to be done. I want a full background check on Elena Alves. Dig deep into her financial records, her associates, everything. There's more to this money laundering scheme than we've uncovered so far." As his team scrambled to follow his orders, Oliveira's phone rang. It was the captain. "Oliveira!" The captain's voice crackled through the speaker. "I need an update." "What's the status of the Alves case?" Oliveira took a deep breath before responding. "Sir, we've had some major developments. Elena Alves has confessed to orchestrating the money laundering scheme. Rodrigo Alves seems to have been less involved than we initially thought, though he's not entirely innocent. And sir, there's a personal angle we didn't anticipate." "Personal angle?" The captain's voice sharpened with interest. "Yes, sir. It turns out that Rodrigo Alves has a daughter he never knew about. The girl who found the lottery ticket. That's her." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Jesus, Oliveira, this case just keeps getting more complicated. Keep me posted on any further developments." "Yes, sir," Oliveira replied, ending the call. Across town in a luxurious penthouse, Carlos paced nervously. He had been trying to reach Elena for hours, but her phone went straight to voicemail. The news of her arrest had sent shockwaves through their network of associates. Carlos knew he had to act fast. With Elena in custody, it was only a matter of time before the authorities started closing in on the rest of them. He grabbed his laptop and began transferring funds to offshore accounts, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Just as he finished, there was a loud knock at the door. "Police, open up!" Carlos felt his heart drop to his stomach. He quickly closed the laptop and looked around frantically for an escape route, but he knew it was too late. The game was up. Back at the police station, Rodrigo sat alone in an interrogation room, his head in his hands. The events of the past few hours played on repeat in his mind. A daughter. He had a daughter. And all these years, he had been chasing wealth and power while she grew up without him. The door opened, and Detective Oliveira entered carrying a thick file. "Mr. Alves," Oliveira began, taking a seat across from Rodrigo. "We need to talk about your involvement in all of this." Rodrigo looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. "Detective, I'm ready to tell you everything I know. No more lies, no more hiding. I want to make things right." Oliveira nodded, opening the file. "Let's start from the beginning. When did you first become aware of the money laundering operation?" As Rodrigo began to speak, pouring out years of secrets and half-truths, Lucy and Martha were being escorted to a safe house by a pair of officers. "Mum," Lucy said quietly as they drove through the city streets. Do you think he really wants to be part of our lives? Martha squeezed her daughter's hand. I don't know, sweetheart. People can change, but it takes time and effort. We'll just have to wait and see. The safe house was a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood. As they settled in, Martha couldn't help but think about how much their lives had changed in just a few short days. From struggling to make ends meet to being at the center of a high-profile criminal investigation, it was almost too much to comprehend. As night fell over São Paulo, the city buzzed with the news of Helena Alves's arrest and the unraveling of a major financial scandal. Reporters camped outside the police station, hungry for any tidbit of information. Inside, Oliveira and his team worked tirelessly, piecing together the complex web of deceit and corruption that had been hidden for so long. With each new revelation, the scope of the investigation grew larger. In his cell, Rodrigo lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of something he had long forgotten. Hope. Hope for redemption. Hope for a chance to be the father he should have been all along. As a new day dawned, bringing with it the promise of more revelations and confrontations, the lives of Rodrigo, Martha, Lucy, and all those caught in this intricate web of fate continued to intertwine in ways they never could have imagined. The lottery ticket that had started it all now seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the much larger prizes of truth and family that had been uncovered. And as the sun rose over São Paulo, casting long shadows across the city, the stage was set for the next act in this real-life drama, one that would test the bonds of family, the limits of forgiveness, and the power of second chances. In the safe house, Lucy woke early, her mind still reeling from the events of the past few days. She found her mother already up, sitting at the small kitchen table with a cup of coffee. Couldn't sleep? Lucy asked, joining her mother. Martha shook her head. Too much on my mind. How are you holding up, sweetie? Lucy shrugged. I'm not sure. It's like everything I thought I knew about my life has changed, and I'm not sure how I feel about him. Martha reached out and took her daughter's hand. That's okay, Lucy. You don't have to figure it all out right away. We'll take it one day at a time. At the police station, Oliveira arrived early, determined to make progress on the case. He found his team already hard at work, sifting through financial records and following up on leads. What have we got? He asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. One of his detectives looked up from her computer. Sir, we've been tracking the money trail from Helena's accounts. It looks like there are connections to several high-profile politicians and business leaders. Oliveira's eyes widened. This is bigger than we thought. Keep digging. I want names, dates, amounts, everything. As the morning wore on, Rodrigo was brought in for another round of questioning. This time, however, there was a different atmosphere in the interrogation room. Gone was the arrogant businessman of before, replaced by a man who seemed genuinely remorseful. Mr. Alves, Oliveira began, we appreciate your cooperation. Your information has been invaluable in unraveling this scheme. However, you must understand that you'll still face consequences for your actions. Rodrigo nodded solemnly. I understand, Detective, and I'm prepared to face whatever punishment is deemed appropriate. But may I ask a favor? Oliveira raised an eyebrow. What is it? I'd like to see my daughter again, to try to explain, to apologize. I know I have no right to ask, but... Oliveira considered for a moment. I'll see what I can do, but it'll be up to Lucy and her mother if they want to see you. Meanwhile, across town, Carlos was being processed at the police station. As he was led to his cell, he caught sight of Helena being escorted down the hallway. Their eyes met for a brief moment, a silent exchange passing between them. They both knew that their carefully constructed world of wealth and power was crumbling around them. As the day progressed, news of the expanding investigation dominated the headlines. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal, while financial markets fluctuated wildly in response to the uncertainty. In the safe house, Lucy and Martha watched the news unfold on a small television. Lucy turned to her mother, a question burning in her eyes. Mom, do you think we'll ever have a normal life again? Martha pulled her daughter close. Oh, sweetheart, our life may not be what we expected, but we have each other. And sometimes that's all the normalcy we need. As evening approached, Oliveira received word that Lucy and Martha had agreed to meet with Rodrigo. The meeting was arranged at a neutral location, under police supervision. The atmosphere was tense as Rodrigo entered the room where Lucy and Martha waited. He paused at the doorway, taking in the sight of his daughter, really seeing her for the first time. "Lucy," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I know that nothing I say can make up for the years I've missed, but I want you to know that if I had known, if I had any idea—" Lucy looked at him, her eyes a mix of curiosity and caution. "Why should I believe you now? How do I know this isn't just another lie?" Rodrigo felt the weight of her words. He looked to Martha, then back to Lucy. "You're right to doubt me. I've done nothing to earn your trust, but if you'll give me a chance, I'd like to try, to be the father I should have been all along." Martha spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "Rodrigo, we appreciate your honesty. But you need to understand, Lucy's well-being comes first. If she's not comfortable with this, we won't push it." Rodrigo nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "Of course I understand. Lucy, I won't force myself into your life, but I want you to know that I'm here, if and when you're ready." As the meeting concluded, Oliveira watched from the observation room, marveling at how a simple lottery ticket had set in motion a chain of events that had exposed long-buried secrets and brought a family together in the most unexpected way. The case was far from over. There were still countless threads to unravel, conspiracies to expose, and justice to be served. But amidst the chaos and uncertainty, there was also the possibility of healing, of second chances, and of a future that none of them could have imagined just a few short days ago. As night fell over São Paulo once again, the city hummed with the energy of secrets revealed and lives forever changed. And somewhere in the vastness of the universe, fate smiled, knowing that its intricate tapestry was unfolding exactly as it should. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Detective Oliveira and his team worked tirelessly, following leads and uncovering a web of corruption that reached far beyond Elena and Rodrigo Alves. Politicians, business leaders, and even some law enforcement officials were implicated in the expanding investigation. For Lucy and Martha, life in the safe house became a strange new normal. Protected by police officers and isolated from the world they knew, they found themselves with plenty of time to process the dramatic changes in their lives. One afternoon, as they sat together on the small balcony of the safe house, Lucy turned to her mother. "Mum, do you think we should give him a chance?" "Rodrigo, I mean." Martha sighed, choosing her words carefully. "Sweetheart, that's a decision only you can make. He's your father, biologically at least, but he hasn't been a part of your life until now. It's okay to take your time, to be cautious." Lucy nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. "I'm just so confused. Part of me is curious, wants to know him, but another part is angry, feels betrayed even though I never knew him before." Martha pulled her daughter close. "Those feelings are all valid, Lucy. There's no right or wrong way to feel about this. We'll figure it out together, okay?" Meanwhile, Rodrigo was coming to terms with the consequences of his actions. Though his cooperation had earned him some leniency, he still faced significant legal troubles. But for the first time in years, his priorities had shifted. Wealth and power no longer seemed important compared to the chance to know his daughter. In his temporary cell, Rodrigo pored over old photo albums that his lawyer had brought him. Pictures of his life with Elena, of business triumphs and social events, all seemed hollow now. He paused on a photo of himself from around the time Lucy would have been born, struck by how young and ambitious he looked, how blind he had been to what truly mattered. Across town, Elena was not faring as well. With her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, she had become withdrawn and sullen. Her lawyer worked tirelessly to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. One day, as Oliveira was reviewing case files, he received an unexpected visitor. It was Carlos, Elena's former associate, who had decided to turn state's witness. "Detective," Carlos began, his voice trembling slightly, "I can't live with the guilt anymore. I want to tell you everything I know about the operation, about who was involved, all of it." Oliveira leaned forward, his interest piqued. "We're listening, Carlos. Start from the beginning." As Carlos began to speak, unraveling years of secrets and illegal activities, Oliveira realized that this case was far from over. In fact, it was about to blow wide open, potentially shaking the very foundations of São Paulo's political and business elite. Days turned into weeks, and slowly life began to find a new rhythm. Lucy returned to school, though under police protection. Her friends were full of questions about the scandal that had dominated the news, but Lucy kept the details of her personal connection to herself. Martha, with the help of a therapist provided by the police department, began to work through her own complex feelings about the situation. Years of keeping Rodrigo's identity a secret from Lucy had taken their toll, and she found herself grappling with guilt and uncertainty about the future. Rodrigo, for his part, respected Lucy's need for space. He sent letters, carefully screened by the police, expressing his remorse and his hope for a chance to be a part of her life. He also began to use his insider knowledge of the business world to assist in the investigation, helping to uncover hidden accounts and secret deals. As the case progressed, São Paulo found itself in the midst of a political earthquake. Several high-ranking officials were arrested, and the city buzzed with rumors and speculation about who would fall next. Through it all, the unlikely family at the center of the storm, Lucy, Martha, and Rodrigo, navigated their new reality one day at a time. There were difficult conversations, tears, and moments of tension, but there were also glimmers of hope, small steps towards understanding and forgiveness. One evening, as Lucy sat doing her homework in the safe house, she came across a math problem that stumped her. Without thinking, she picked up the phone and dialed the number Rodrigo had given her. "Hello?" his voice came through, surprised and hopeful. "Hi, it's Lucy," she said, suddenly feeling nervous. I have this math problem I can't figure out. Mom's not great at math, so I thought maybe—" "Of course," Rodrigo replied, trying to keep the excitement out of his voice. "I'd be happy to help. What's the problem?" As they worked through the math together, something shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't even trust. But it was a start, a small bridge across the chasm of years and secrets that had separated them. When they finished, there was a moment of awkward silence. Then Lucy spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Thanks, Dad." The word hung in the air, fragile and new. Rodrigo felt tears spring to his eyes. "Anytime, Lucy. Anytime you need me, I'm here." As Lucy hung up the phone, she felt a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. But for the first time since this whole ordeal began, she felt a glimmer of hope for the future. Outside, the lights of São Paulo twinkled in the night sky, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always the possibility of light. The city had been shaken to its core, secrets had been exposed, and lives had been forever changed. But from the ashes of scandal and deception, the seeds of redemption and renewal were beginning to sprout. The lottery ticket that had started it all was now just a footnote in a much larger story, a story of family, of second chances, and of the unexpected ways that fate can bring people together. As the investigation continued to unfold, and the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. But perhaps, just perhaps, it could be something better.